Victor Langston was a man whose name carried weight in the world of ranching. As a billionaire rancher, he owned vast acres of land in Montana, a place where the winds whispered across endless fields and the sun set over horizons that seemed to stretch forever. He had inherited the land from his late father, a man who had built a legacy in the cattle industry. But unlike his father, Victor wasn't interested in the spotlight. He preferred solitude, the quiet hum of his ranch and the rhythm of daily chores. Since the death of his wife, Emma, 5 years ago, Victor had retreated further into himself, becoming a figure known more for his wealth than his warmth. The ranch, once a lively place filled with laughter and love, now echoed with an emptiness that mirrored his heart. His staff, loyal and hard-working, ran the day-to-day operations while Victor remained a silent observer, tending to his land with the same meticulous care that he had always applied to his business ventures. On this particular morning, the sky above Montana was a brilliant blue, with only a few scattered clouds drifting lazily by. Victor rode out on horseback, as he did most mornings, to inspect his farthest reaches. The journey was one of routine, but something about today felt different, like the air was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Little did Victor know, as he guided his horse through the rugged terrain, that his path was about to intersect with something that would change his life forever. The quiet of the land was soon broken by a faint sound, a rustle in the distance, and what Victor would discover next would shake him to his core. Victor Langston's horse moved steadily over the uneven ground, its hooves striking the earth with a rhythmic sound that echoed in the vast emptiness around him. He had always loved the solitude of these morning rides, his time to think, to reflect on the things that mattered most, and to clear his mind of the burdens that came with being a billionaire rancher. Yet today, his thoughts were restless, tugged at by the silent weight of grief that had lingered in his chest for years. He rode through a narrow valley, the landscape around him wild and untamed, a reminder of the land's ancient power. His ranch stretched as far as the eye could see, the only sign of life being the distant cattle and his occasional ranch hands working along the edges of the property. As he rounded a corner of jagged rocks, a small movement caught his eye. At first, it seemed like a mirage, a trick of the light, perhaps, but then it grew clearer. Through the tall grasses and brush, a small figure emerged, stumbling and weak. It was a foal, a young horse, barely more than a few weeks old, its coat dull and matted, its ribs visible beneath the skin. The creature staggered forward, its eyes sunken and pleading, as though it were searching for something, or someone. Victor's heart lurched at the sight. The foal's condition was dire. It looked lost, frightened, and weak from hunger. The poor creature's movements were slow and shaky, as if it could barely summon the strength to keep going. Victor's gaze softened as he drew his horse closer, instinctively slowing down as he reached the foal. He knew that there was little chance the animal could survive much longer on its own. The land was harsh, unforgiving, and it was clear the foal had wandered far from any herd. Victor dismounted, his boots crunching softly against the dirt as he knelt beside the foal. He extended a hand cautiously, and for a moment the foal hesitated, its large eyes locking with his. There was a raw vulnerability in those eyes, one that resonated with Victor's own feelings of loss and isolation. The foal, despite its condition, seemed to trust him, as though it sensed that help was near. He gently reached for the foal, feeling the frailty of its body beneath his touch. The foal's coat was matted with dirt, and its breath was shallow, but it didn't resist when Victor carefully led it toward his horse. He couldn't leave it to fend for itself. The ranch was too far from any other form of help, and he knew the foal wouldn't make it through the night on its own. Victor carefully guided the foal toward his horse, his thoughts swirling as he considered what to do next. He didn't know why, but something deep inside told him this foal was no ordinary animal. Perhaps it was the desperate look in its eyes or the strange feeling of connection he felt as he cradled it against him. Either way, he knew that it wasn't just a lost foal. It was something more, something that would soon reveal a truth that would change everything. As they made their way back toward the ranch, the foal's small body resting against his horse's side, Victor felt a strange sense of urgency rising within him. He couldn't explain why, but he had the undeniable feeling that this discovery was only the beginning of something much bigger. The ranch, his family's legacy, and even his own life seemed to hinge on this moment. By the time Victor arrived back at the ranch with the foal, the sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. The foal, weak but still alive, clung to the side of his horse as if it understood the safety it had found in Victor's presence. It was a fragile creature, but there was a resilience in its eyes, a spark of life that refused to be extinguished. Victor led the foal into the barn, the familiar scent of hay and leather filling his nostrils as he made his way past the rows of cattle stalls. He had given the foal some water and a small portion of grain during the ride back, but it was clear that it needed more than just food, more than just shelter. It needed care, compassion, and attention, something Victor had long since stopped offering to anyone, including himself. Inside the barn, his ranch hands were already finishing their day's work, but they stopped when they saw the foal. One of them, a seasoned rancher named Sam, raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Where'd you find it, Victor?" "Out in the middle of nowhere." Victor nodded, his brow furrowed. "It was lost, starving. I couldn't leave it out there. It's barely hanging on." Sam shook his head. "It's a miracle you found it. Looks like it's been through hell." Victor said nothing as he carefully led the foal to a clean corner of the barn, setting up a small area with fresh hay and blankets. He called to one of the younger ranch hands, Anna, to fetch some medical supplies. Anna, a kind-hearted girl with a natural instinct for animals, quickly went to work, applying ointments to the foal's coat to soothe its skin and massaging its legs to improve circulation. As the night wore on, Victor stayed by the foal's side, making sure it had food and water, speaking to it in soft, comforting tones. The foal, although exhausted and wary, seemed to trust him. It allowed Victor to clean its wounds and offer nourishment, its eyes often meeting his with a look that seemed to say, "Thank you." In the quiet of the barn, with the gentle sounds of the ranch in the background, Victor began to feel something he hadn't in years, a connection, a sense of purpose that went beyond the endless tasks of running a ranch. He was caring for this foal, a helpless creature that had somehow found its way to him. And in doing so, he was caring for something deeper within himself, the part of him that had been hollowed out by grief and loss. The foal responded to Victor's care in small ways. It began to nibble on the hay, its small mouth pushing through the strands more eagerly than before. Its breathing slowed, and its eyes began to regain their focus. As the days passed, the foal's strength gradually returned, though it remained weak and fragile. Victor's daily routine now included visits to the barn, where he would sit by the foal's side, sometimes for hours, watching it grow stronger. He had always been a man of action, one who preferred to work alone and avoid emotional connections. But as the foal slowly regained its strength, something unexpected began to happen. He found himself opening up, little by little. The ranch hands noticed the change. Sam, who had worked with Victor for years, gave him a knowing look one evening. "You're getting attached, aren't you?" Victor didn't answer at first, focusing instead on the foal, which was now standing on its own, its legs a little steadier. "I guess I am," he said quietly, his voice rougher than usual. "It's not a bad thing," Sam said, his tone softer now. "Animals have a way of breaking through walls we didn't even know we put up." Victor nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He hadn't realized just how much the foal's presence had affected him until now. For the first time in years, he was no longer alone in the barn at night. The foal's gentle presence, its innocent trust in him, was something Victor hadn't known he needed. As days turned into weeks, the bond between Victor and the foal deepened. The foal, who Victor had taken to calling Spirit, became a constant companion, following him around the ranch with an eagerness that was both heartwarming and unexpected. It would nuzzle his hand, nicker at him as he worked, and even follow him to the far reaches of the ranch, as if it, too, had a sense of belonging here. Victor found himself laughing more, his heart lightened by Spirit's energy. For the first time in years, he began to look forward to the days ahead, to the quiet companionship of the foal and the simple joy of watching it grow stronger. Spirit was more than just an animal to him now. It was a reminder of the healing power of love and care, and a symbol of the hope that, even in the darkest of times, life could find a way to return. Victor stood outside the barn one crisp morning, watching Spirit, now stronger and more confident, galloping through the pasture, its mane flying in the wind. There was a sense of vitality in the foal that hadn't been there when it first arrived. The animal had come a long way, and Victor couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride in how far it had come. But there was still something about Spirit that lingered in his thoughts, something unexplained. Over the past few weeks, Victor had found himself looking at the foal with increasing curiosity. It wasn't just the unusual strength and resilience Spirit showed, nor the way it seemed to bond with him so quickly. There was something else, something in the foal's features that struck a chord in him. The shape of its body, its eyes, and most notably, a strange, faint mark on its neck, a distinct, nearly circular scar that looked like a brand. That mark was what had been bothering him. Victor had initially thought it was just a rough patch of skin, but now that Spirit was stronger, he could see it clearly. It resembled a brand, but the symbol was unlike any he had ever seen on his ranch. It was more intricate, almost like a crest, not the simple livestock brand common on the ranches in Montana. Victor's mind wandered back to the day Spirit arrived. There had been something about the foal's eyes, the way it held itself, like it was part of something more than just a wild animal. He hadn't put it together before, but now, standing by the barn, it clicked. That's when Claire Thompson, a local rancher and old acquaintance of his, pulled up to the barn. She was a sharp woman, knowledgeable about horses and the surrounding ranches. Victor had always admired her insight. But today, there was something urgent in her expression as she dismounted her horse. "Victor," Claire called, walking toward him. "I need to talk to you about something. It's about the foal." Victor raised an eyebrow. He'd grown used to Claire stopping by, but never with this kind of tone. "What's going on?" he asked, motioning for her to join him by the barn. She glanced at Spirit, who was now grazing in the field, and then lowered her voice. "That foal isn't just any wild animal. It's—" she hesitated, as if unsure how to proceed. "It's part of a bloodline that's not just rare, it's legendary." Victor's pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Claire took a deep breath. "That mark on its neck. It's not just a scar. It's a brand, one that belongs to a line of horses bred specifically for a high-profile client. A man you probably know, Jasper Whitmore, the billionaire rancher from California." Victor stiffened. Whitmore's name was notorious in the ranching world. He was known for his vast fortune and the collection of rare horses he bred, animals that were worth millions. "You're telling me that this foal is from one of his horses?" Victor asked incredulously. Claire nodded slowly. "Yes. Years ago, Whitmore bought a ranch in Nevada, where he started breeding this particular line of horses. The bloodline is prized for its strength, intelligence, and speed. But about 6 months ago, a fire broke out on his ranch. He lost nearly everything, including his horses. This foal is one of the survivors, and somehow it made its way to you." Victor felt a cold chill run through him. The idea that Spirit, this creature he had nurtured back to life, was part of a rare bloodline, and connected to someone like Whitmore, seemed impossible. Yet the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. The foal's behavior, its resilience, the brand, it all pointed back to this. "I don't understand," Victor muttered, his thoughts racing. "Why would it come here? Why did it end up lost on my land?" Claire's eyes softened with sympathy. "There's something about that bloodline. It has a strong instinct to return to its roots, to find the people who bred it. Maybe it sensed that, deep down, this land was once connected to your family. Your father bred some of those horses years ago, didn't he?" Victor's heart sank as the pieces fell into place. His father had once been involved in breeding horses, though he'd never spoken much of it. The idea that Spirit had somehow found its way back to him, that it was seeking him out as if it knew the land, was more than just coincidence. It felt like fate. "Are you saying that Spirit was meant to come back to me?" Victor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire's gaze softened, and she nodded. "It seems like it. And it looks like it's more than just a wild horse. It's part of your legacy, Victor. And now, it's yours to protect." As the weight of her words settled over him, Victor stood still, staring out at the foal, which had paused in its grazing to look back at him. It was more than just an animal now. It was a symbol of everything Victor had lost, everything he'd forgotten. And perhaps, just maybe, it was the key to his redemption. In the weeks that followed, Victor began to understand the true significance of Spirit's presence in his life. The foal was no longer just a creature he had rescued. It had become a symbol of his own healing, a reminder of the legacy he had abandoned and the connections he had neglected. Victor found himself visiting Spirit every morning, watching as it grew stronger, more confident, and more attuned to the rhythms of the ranch. For the first time in years, Victor felt a sense of purpose beyond the demands of his wealth and business. He reinvigorated his father's horse breeding program, honoring the family legacy that had been overshadowed by years of loss and grief. Spirit, with its rare bloodline and resilient spirit, became the centerpiece of the program, a living testament to the past he had shut away. Victor's heart, once hardened by solitude and sorrow, began to soften. The ranch, once a reminder of emptiness, now felt full again, not just with animals, but with hope. As Spirit grew into a powerful horse, Victor realized that he, too, had found strength in nurturing something vulnerable. And in doing so, he had finally begun to heal. Years passed, and the ranch flourished in ways Victor had never imagined. With Spirit leading the way, the breeding program became renowned not only for the quality of its horses but for the story behind them, a story of loss, rediscovery, and renewal. Victor's name was no longer just tied to wealth, but to the legacy of resilience and connection. On a quiet evening, as the sun set over the sprawling land, Victor stood at the edge of his ranch, Spirit grazing peacefully by his side. The foal that had once stumbled weak and lost in the wilderness was now a powerful, majestic horse, and in many ways, so was Victor. He had healed in the same way Spirit had, through time, care, and the courage to confront his past. Looking out over the land his father had once loved, Victor finally felt at peace. The ranch, the legacy, and the bond he shared with Spirit were no longer burdens. They were the foundation of his new life. In the distance, the winds whispered across the fields, carrying with them the promise of a future filled with hope. Victor smiled softly. He had come full circle. And for the first time in years, he knew exactly where he belonged.